They don't need to chain you when they can shape you. They don't need to silence you when they can teach you what's safe to say. The most effective control doesn't feel like control. It feels like choice. When obedience is rebranded as responsibility and submission as survival, you don't realize you're serving something that doesn't serve you back. You just think you're doing what's right. From a young age, you were taught an invisible curriculum, not in textbooks, but between the lines. You were rewarded for compliance, not curiosity, praised when your voice fit expectations, and corrected when it didn't. This is how training begins, not just through punishment, but through the promise of belonging. People trade freedom for acceptance when belonging feels scarce. You learned your worth depends on performance, that love is conditional, that safety means silence, that success is defined by standards you didn't choose. The system didn't invent these lessons. It built a world where they thrive. If it can make you chase approval, it never needs to chase you. You'll volunteer your own servitude, believing in its progress. People mistake power for permission. They assume authority is earned, that rules exist for a reason. But that belief is part of the training. When structure feels like safety, you protect the cage you live in. You defend it against those who question it, calling them reckless or naive to preserve the illusion. This is how oppression hides in ordinary logic, in the quiet belief that this is just how things are. But it's not life, it's conditioning. A story repeated until invisible. And you learn to harmonize with it because silence felt safer than dissent. Notice how people police each other, how ridicule replaces rebellion, how healing becomes too sensitive, and questioning becomes difficult. This isn't random, it's social enforcement. When the system no longer needs to punish you, it trains you to punish each other. The chains become interpersonal and feel personal, not political. You've seen it. Someone speaks truth and loses comfort. The system doesn't silence them. It makes silence cheaper than honesty. So people perform sincerity instead of feeling it. They smile when tired, agree when they don't, project virtue while craving rest. This is modern obedience, appearing free while privately collapsing. Every time you shrink your truth to keep peace, you serve a system that depends on your silence. Because illusions, not force, keep empires intact. Here's the paradox. When you try to unlearn it, your own fear defends it. Fear was designed into the system. Fear of rejection, failure, isolation. Generation after generation inherits both trauma and training. They call it realism, but it's survival through compliance. They confuse adaptation with wisdom, endurance with alignment, and that confusion keeps the system alive. Exhaustion replaces reflection. Numbness becomes peace. Avoidance becomes maturity. You can see it, a dull glow where curiosity once lived. The system doesn't say, don't rebel. It says, rebel safely. It sells rebellion as long as it doesn't threaten profit. You can be bold if it's marketable, outspoken if you still consume. It's not censorship anymore, it's distraction. Yes, nothing kills awareness faster than overstimulation. The modern oppressor isn't a person, it's a pattern. You must earn rest, prove your value, compete to belong. It lives in algorithms, workplaces, families that confuse control with care. People defend their exhaustion as identity. I'm productive, I don't need help. But really, they've forgotten who they were before they had to earn their existence. Somewhere you remember that version of you, the one who created freely, rested without guilt, felt without filtering. That self was deemed inefficient. You were taught to sacrifice it for approval and believed approval was love. But when acceptance replaces love, it becomes control. You fear disappointing others more than betraying yourself, because you were taught safety lives and obedience. But what if the opposite is true? As every act of obedience that cost you peace was a quiet betrayal. Every exhaustion, resistance to your nature. This is where awakening begins. Not in anger, but in grief. Grief for how long you served without knowing. And that grief is sacred. Once you feel it, the illusion begins to break. You see the pattern. A story that survives only if you believe it. As belief loosens, something stirs. the untrained self, the one who remembers freedom. That's what the system fears most. Not external rebellion, but internal awakening. Because when people awaken, control collapses. Systems rely on forgetting. Remembering who you are is disobedience. Awakening isn't glamorous. It's messy, isolating. You see how many relationships were built on shared submission. The distance hurts, but it's clarity. And clarity is the beginning of freedom. Ought you notice language? How people hide behind, "I'm fine." Every word becomes a negotiation between truth and acceptance. When you stop negotiating, people become uncomfortable. Not because you're wrong, but because your freedom exposes their fear. Freedom awakens longing, and longing threatens systems built on numbness. Awakening looks like rebellion to those still asleep. You're not attacking them. You're reflecting what they suppress. Something shifts. You stop trying to convince anyone. Liberation spreads through example, not argument. You begin untraining, resting without permission, creating without approval, speaking even when your voice shakes. Each act restores what was forgotten. Your value was never meant to be proven. Remembering hurts. You grieve the years spent performing. But this isn't regression. It's resurrection. As the system still whispers, through doubt, fear, and validation. It calls freedom chaos. But chaos only appears when control dissolves. Freedom is natural order restored. Everything begins to feel different. You see how deeply the system shaped your identity. It taught you to measure worth, distrust intuition, fear softness. Awakening feels like breaking because you're dismantling what you thought was you. For a time, it feels like losing everything, but you're shedding what was never yours. And in that shedding, calm emerges. You realize the system lives in habits, thoughts, tone. It can't be overthrown. It must be outgrown. Awareness changes everything. Fear loses power when you stop defining yourself through the system. You become untamed. Freedom doesn't harden you, it softens you. You see aggression as pain, such defensiveness as confusion. Oppressor and oppressed become one pattern, sustained by unconsciousness. Awareness deepens compassion. People cling to harm because it feels safer than the unknown. You practice quiet rebellion, presence, listening, creating space. Liberation spreads as remembrance. The system fades, not through collapse, but irrelevance. It can't control those who don't seek approval. It can't exploit those who define their own enough. Healing is quiet, in how you speak to yourself, in choosing rest over proving. Each small act dissolves conditioning. Awakening becomes return. To your body, your breath, your rhythm. You were never broken, only trained to forget. And once you see clearly, the illusion can't hold. You stumble forward, learning gentleness. Awakening becomes reunion. You remember your sacredness. And remembering is the most radical act left. You stand awake, not finished, not triumphant, just awake. And in the quiet, you wonder, what kind of world might emerge if we all remembered at once?